Hey everybody, welcome back to Video So today we're going to continue a series on the MiSTer FPGA DE10 Nano project, and we have another testing video on the current core for you today because Christmas is over. You've gotten all those presents opened up, you've eaten all that food, and now it's time to get back to Nintendo 64. And tell me down below what you got for Christmas. I would be very curious. I'm recording this video slightly before, so I have no idea what I got yet. I'll tell you guys later. But I've been getting a lot of requests for Nintendo 64 DD footage. Do be aware that while this does run on Nintendo 64, these are modified variants that aren't utilizing the actual hardware of the DD, whether they're in the core or on an EverDrive for your Nintendo 64. And that is because all the DD really is a different way to load up data into the Nintendo 64 so it can be processed and put out the back of your system as a video signal you can control. But F-Zero right here, the expansion pack, works 100% on the current core. Now I will say that as I tried DD games, pretty much like 75% of them just would not work for me. But that's because they might be doing something different that is set up for emulation and not for real hardware. These are just fun tests. Robert hasn't mentioned anything about doing 64 DD support in the core, and honestly if it never actually happened I wouldn't be too worried about it because there isn't a huge library of games. Sure, F-Zero X does have that expansion, but the good thing is it works here. You have stuff like SimCity as well that I couldn't get to boot, but honestly there's so many different ways to play SimCity. If you can't play DD games with native hardware in the core, honestly it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to me. Or who knows, maybe he announced it over Christmas and this is completely irrelevant. He likes to surprise us. But as far as the DD implementation here in the F-Zero X ROM, it works. You can go into course edit, you can play around, you can create your own courses, but do be aware that it is quite confusing to figure out what you're doing here. You basically have to draw out the path of your course. It is very mind-bending and I am not good at it whatsoever. But you guys are really curious to know what DD games were currently working, and you can put F-Zero X on that list. And if you do play around with the course designer, let me know how it goes. I've never actually been able to complete a course in this thing. I have tried a few times in past years on software emulation. It just isn't a thing for me, but getting the expansion to F-Zero X is a ton of fun. But let's move from something on the DD to something on the bone stock Nintendo 64, because you guys have been asking for a retest of Duke Nukem 64 for like the last month, and I meant to get around to it, I just kept forgetting. Obviously you know I've remembered this time, because the last time I showed Duke Nukem 64 there was a lot of graphical corruption and missing textures, and some polygons were just going into infinity in the middle of the screen. Now if there's anything wrong with the image and gameplay here on Duke Nukem 64, I would have absolutely no idea. Just be aware that it is Nintendo 64, so the one thing wrong with it is they did do some censorship, and that is always a bummer. I'm pretty sure people could have handled that one dancing scene on the screen there. But I am impressed just by how many people wanted to actually see a retest of this, because if I do think about playing Duke Nukem 3D, I'm probably just going to play one of the modern source ports versus the Nintendo 64 version. That's probably because I didn't have this on Nintendo 64 back in the day, I had it on my PC. So tell me down below, did you have this game back in the day, and how does it really compare in later levels against the actual PC release? Because I'm only playing this for testing, I've never actually gotten through the entirety of Duke Nukem 64. But from all the explosions, all of that geometry there, all of the sprite work, this is running at a perfect frame rate, and the controls are as good as they ever could be on Nintendo 64. Definitely not keyboard style on PC, but it does get the job done, and I get why you guys wanted to see this one tested. This is one of the most popular first-person shooters of the 90s, and it was ported to basically pretty much every console and system imaginable, and it is so much better than the last time we checked into it in probably like October. And that's how quick the development on this core has been. Last time we looked at this game, it was definitely not playable whatsoever. Now it seems perfect compared to real hardware. And honestly, that's all you could really ask. And as you'll see here as I shoot the pig cop, it is a little bit blurrier of a sprite compared to pretty much any other Duke Nukem release, but that blurriness and the way the Nintendo 64 actually draws the architecture has a certain sense of charm to it that makes the game feel both infinitely familiar as well as very foreign. I kind of wish we'd gotten a Shadow Warrior port on Nintendo 64 as well, but I love the changes in this game. This store used to sell adult VHS tapes. Now it is selling weapons. I don't know that that's any better than the other store. Honestly, one might be more dangerous than the other, but some of the censorship in this game kind of confuses me, because you think they would have just turned it into a convenience store. That would have made way more sense to have it be a bodega than what you just saw. But again, it's just a game that 100% works. You guys have been asking to see a retest for it, and now I can tell you with pure certainty that this looks, feels, plays, and sounds like the Duke Nukem 64 you're all familiar with. And this puzzle here always breaks my brain. I can never remember the combination to it. You kind of have to just poke around and see what's going on, but I sadly got interrupted right there, so I need to deal with that guy so we can move on to the next game in our testing set for this video. So let's take a look at Zeman 3D. No idea if I'm pronouncing that right, probably not. You can tell me down below, and I actually appreciate when you guys tell me. I do not do well with pronunciation of Japanese words. Now this is in the 64 DD directories as far as sets of games are concerned, but it did come out on cartridge as well. It's a really weird mix of kind of technologies, for lack of a better term, but it's got an amazing soundtrack, and you know what time it is. It's time for the soundtrack sample portion of this video. Listen and I'll be right back. Great soundtrack and great sound quality on the core. So we're playing one of the two included games on this cartridge, Solid Gear. There's also Unagi-san, which is going to be a shmup based on a rabbit-like character. This is definitely the better of the two, but what this game truly is, outside of these games that they've included in it, is your own 3D shmup development system on Nintendo 64. It's a really interesting concept, and I know when they were working on DD titles, whether they released or not, the concept was that some of these were creative studios, like Polygon Studio or Mario Paint, but this game right here seems to have the most comprehensive set of tools, which is interesting as it wasn't made by Nintendo whatsoever. If you can't tell already, this has a very big relationship to Star Soldier, a game that I have tested previously on this series of videos. But again, if you're looking for another game that just works, this is 100% worth your time. Now obviously the Nintendo 64 shmup library is paper thin, but this adds to it, basically almost doubling the shmup library if you ask my opinion on what qualifies and doesn't. A lot of people call Star Fox a shmup. I don't really feel that way, but tell me down below if you consider it a shmup or not. I would be curious. I think of it more as a 3D on-rail shooter myself. But as far as this game is concerned, the visuals, the music, the controls, everything just seems to be 100% working on the current core, and that is great because it gives you another game to enjoy if you are a fan of the shmup genre. Obviously no one's buying Nintendo 64s or loading up Nintendo 64 cores because they want to play a ton of shmups. We got the Sega Saturn core for that, but this is another game that works, and it's one that a lot of you requested to see. Now moving over to Bomberman 64 Second Attack, when this started working with the new TLB implementation, I made that video very quickly. I showed you guys the intro and moved on to the next game. But you know, if you watch my channel, I absolutely love Bomberman, and Bomberman Hero is my favorite Nintendo 64 game of all time, followed closely by Second Attack. It doesn't have the same sense of 3D platforming that Hero did, which takes it down a notch in my book, but I definitely have been playing this in the background both to test it and to get another run through of Second Attack in. And just like all the other Bomberman games we've shown before, this is another one of those titles where if there's anything wrong with it, I would be hard pressed in its entirety to find it. The music, the graphics, the controls, there's been no glitches whatsoever. I haven't seen any freezing. It is just another classic Nintendo 64 game. And if you do collect for Nintendo 64, you're probably aware that an English language copy of this game is definitely going to cost you a lot of money. I do have one on my shelf, but I got it like 15 years ago, and I think I paid like $10. And that's why these cores are great as well. If you want to play a game as close to original hardware as possible without spending a quarter of your rent payment for that month, you have the option to do it now. And the performance here, everything about this game is just so much fun. And I love a sense of humor as well. We're talking about going up this pipe right here, and Bomberman is just shaking his head saying he does not want to go, saying the water's too dirty, while he's literally standing in it. It's a little slide nod to how ridiculous this game is, but it always does make me laugh when I see that little line there. It's because he can't actually swim. As we move further into the game, if you've never played Bomberman 64 Second Attack, or any of the Bomberman games on Nintendo 64, do it for me if for nobody else. I will give you a money back guarantee that you're going to have fun, but like I always say, since you pay me nothing for these videos, that money back guarantee is worth absolutely nothing. but this is just another one of my favorite Nintendo 64 games. I had it when I was a kid, I repurchased it in my early 20s, and I've had it ever since on the shelf. And this is one of my most anticipated games outside of the Castlevanias, which I'm going to be doing tests for shortly, and I was so happy to see when the other two Bomberman games started working on the core when we got TLB implemented. But now moving over to the second game in Dzamen 3D, this is Usagi-san, and this is just the weirdest thing ever, and I love that they have basically spoofed the actual loading of an arcade board. Even though all three of the ROMs are saying NG, that means no good, so technically this game should not boot if it is a real arcade board. A little bit of nerdery there for you, but I just thought that was kind of funny, and I wonder if they thought about that when they put it up. You are a spaceship fighting rabbits. That's the weirdest thing to say about this game, but it is absolutely charming, and it's got a hilarious soundtrack as well. So go ahead and listen just for 30 seconds, and I'll come back and tell you more about the absurdity that is Usagi-san, because it is weird. Super fun soundtrack, and in some ways it reminds me of Cho Aniki, and if you've never played that franchise, any games from it, definitely Google it after the fact. It is an absurdly weird game, but it is filled with charm, and it's a ton of fun to play as well. But Usagi-san here is fun as well. You have these robot rabbits coming in, riding the log flume, and you need to shoot the rope above them to break something above them so they drop down. Has a little bit of a Jumping Flash vibe as well, with a robot rabbit shooting carrots, but obviously gameplay-wise they have nothing in common whatsoever. But this is another fun game to check out, because for every Super Mario 64 or Legend of Zelda, there's something like Usagi-san here, which is just something that I feel like maybe 90% of people watching this video have never heard of, and tell me down below if you've heard of it before. Now, I didn't zoom this in, it does change the aspect ratio, and sometimes I do these to fit in Resolve, but I love how that screen actually undulates to make it look like real water at the top and the bottom. It's a fun little effect on how it draws the image. But if you're looking for a new game to play now that Christmas is over, Usagi-san and the entire Dzamen 3D suite is just a lot of fun. It's a different experience to have on the core. 10 out of 10 recommend, even if it's not a 10 out of 10 game. But that's the current situation with the current core and the slate of tests, both user requests and things I wanted to show you. I'm going to keep doing these, so leave me a comment down below and tell me what game you want to see tested next. Maybe I've missed something, or maybe it's been a long time since I checked into it, because a lot of the games that I remember testing were probably back in like September and October, and probably have a completely different reality as far as the core performance is concerned today. But it's been a hell of a 2023 doing these testing videos. There's a lot more work in the core to be done in 2024, and I'm going to keep making these testing videos so long as you guys watch them. Hope you had a great holiday, hope you have a good happy New Year's, and I will see you guys next time. Bye bye.